much. I appreciate it. First, a quick question. It'd be easier for me to keep my mask on. Do I sound okay? Am I intelligible? For the most part, thank you so very
Yeah.
much. I appreciate that. I also come from a Teams school, so forgive me if my Zoom-ness is just a bit clunky here, but I'm sure I'll get there for a moment here. All right, let's see. Oh, there we go. Almost smooth. Is my PowerPoint up? Do I
Yep.
look good? Thank you so very
Yeah,
much.
you
I
look good.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. I'll jump right in. So today we'll be talking about how college and teaching will never be the same yet again. And I was prompted to begin thinking about this because, I noticed that as many of our institutions moved to online learning and digital technology platforms in an increased way during the pandemic, whether it was commentators in the media, education scholars, even our own administrators, there's a very quickly moving discussion about how things in the COVID era might change education. And already it was April of 2020, Mike Silagadze, the CEO of Top Hat, shared an article here that I put the image up, how COVID-19 may forever change the way professors teach. And it's really no coincidence that this perspective came from the CEO of an educational technology vendor. Much of the history of ed tech involves marketing and promises about the future, coupled with some new products' indispensability. And historian Audrey Watters has cataloged the selling of the future in education, including things that might sound really implausible from past and future, but that includes things like robot teachers, neural uploads to the brain, and even one of my favorites, Zeppelin classrooms. Ed tech loves to dream big, or at least make the small look larger than it is. So I wanted to offer a perspective to kind of temper some of this enthusiasm about transformation. As I mentioned, these stories are frequently oversold, informed by fever for the new, economic ambitions of technology companies, and even some of our own trendy institutional branding to have the latest and coolest new thing on campus. My goal isn't necessarily to reject lessons of pandemic instruction, but to reframe them to think about their long-term disruptive influence. What can we actually learn from this moment that's going to stick in perpetuity, and how might we be misled? I don't want to plug my LinkedIn profile or anything too much here and give my whole biography, but I definitely have to say that I'm sure it's true for many of us attending and presenting. My background and context for my work is really instrumental in understanding my talk. So I've got a picture here of the Weimer K. Hicks Center at Kalamazoo College. It's a beautiful sunny Midwest day. There's balloons, a welcome sign, many students and families sitting about our campus with greenery and columns and all the markings of wonderful higher education. And like many small liberal arts colleges, one of our pitches to prospective students is our faculty to student ratios. We have about 1,500 students, attentive faculty members, easy access to resources that you don't get from large state schools or even maybe larger private schools. So when the decision came at the end of our winter quarter last year to move online, it is no hyperbole to say that it is catastrophic. I love to tell this anecdote because I think it's really informative of where we were at. I was sitting in a room with two departments who had come together to sort of brainstorm in preparation for spring. I'll let them remain nameless, but they were influential, highly trafficked majors. And I was in the room as the educational technology specialist to kind of help and support their thinking about online learning. And at some point in time, someone intervened and they said, out of curiosity, how many of you have ever taught an online class before? And out of about 24, tenured, untenured visiting faculty members, one hand raised, and that it was my own. I was the only person in the room who had ever taught an online class before. And I realized just how unique that was, that so many of our faculty members in their ascendancy through academia had never had to teach an online class. I think for many, adjunct and visiting instructors, that's kind of unthinkable. And I realized it was actually probably likely based on some of the institutions they attended that they probably hadn't taken any online classes either. So my point in this is that, I mean, it's obvious to say that COVID certainly changed the way professors at small liberal arts colleges in the United States were teaching, but that doesn't mean it was as drastically impactful for everyone. Plenty of university, community college, vocational schools, for-profit learning institutions, and others had been using many of the online techniques and tools that we were going to turn to. This is probably the simplest refutation of the transformative impact of COVID-19 at education at large, and another testament to the limit of talking about higher education in the United States as though it was one monolithic thing. Still, we can ask about the transformative impact of contingency online learning as an institution like my own and like many of yours. To what extent were these practices meaningfully transformative? And to what extent were they just sort of reiterations of the same familiar pedagogies with a new technology veneer? Which leads me back to my original intervention. Here's the Top Hat article again, how COVID-19 may forever change the way professors teach. If you're not familiar with Top Hat, it's kind of like a all-in-one LMS supplement or learning platform. If you look at their LMS integration on their website, their priorities, featured are grading, tracking engagement, that's their term, the power of data, and attendance based on a three-pronged system that includes proximity detection. So here it is. This is from their website. Student attendance and evaluation of the top 3 tracking technologies. Choosing the best attendance tracker isn't easy. Top Hat, At Top Hat, we've been able to come up with a method and come up with a hybrid solution, combining the best features of polling, geolocation, and proximity detection. So if you're someone who's particularly concerned about student privacy, surveillance, and the logic of algorithms, Top Hat might not be your first choice. And I don't say that to pick on them, but it does add some context. What also jumped out at me about the quote from their CEO, Mike Silagadze, was that qualifier of forever. And this was a sort of the extreme statement that would catch my eye. What might these new, deeply altered ways of teaching look like? What might have we permanently left behind? And before diving into that vision of the future, I'm going to pull in scholar Audrey Watters. So first, responding already in May of last year with a talk called Educational Crises in EdTech: A History, Watters reminds us that, be it by displacement by war, wildfires, the challenges in crumbling school buildings, that, quote, there are precedents for what we are experiencing now, not just in the distant past or in some faraway land. The other important piece that Watters offers as one of the reoccurring themes of her work is that educational technology is often offered as a solution to crises, and in addition, whatever might be perceived as ailing instructional models. I've titled this talk, College and Teaching Will Never Be the Same Again, because Watters has done an excellent job of chronicling claims about transformative change for colleges. Despite this notion's persistence, many core dynamics, assumptions, practices, and pedagogies are relatively familiar to their predecessors, even if the modality and style changes. One of the most recent examples that she spent some time writing about is one of my favorites, and that's virtual reality. Now, full disclosure, I run a virtual reality lab, so I am complicit in this and have a nuanced, sort of complicated view to these claims. But I provided on this slide a number of headlines grabbed from across the web, and I'll read some of them for you. Shakespeare in your living room, how AR can transform teaching. Virtual reality advances bring new possibilities to higher education. Virtual reality is changing the education system globally. There's a picture over on the right of what looks like probably early elementary students with virtual reality headsets on their faces and just looks of awe as they stare up to the sky. And of course, CNN Health asks, can virtual reality revolutionize education? But one of the things Audrey Watters writes about is the long history of promises about the impact of stereoscopic education. Some of the same claims that are made now about virtual reality were made about what I would remember from my childhood as a mechanical viewmaster. Its capacity to provide access to travel, empathy training, its scientific rigor, and so much more. Now, like I said, I do believe that virtual and augmented reality probably it would be too much to say that they have no educational impact. They certainly have. I wouldn't have a VR lab if they didn't. However, the massive promises of transformation due to immersive stereoscopic headsets is overstated. While these technologies can be fun and can be engaging when crafted well, they have and likely will continue to fail to revolutionize styles of instruction, distributions of academic resources, or open opportunities where they were previously closed, especially if you believe that putting a headset on a student and showing them the Colosseum is not the same thing as taking them to Rome. In addition, these innovations are not distributed equally or consistently relevant to students in the broad educational sphere. How many institutions can afford a VR lab or something like the Digital Scholarship 360 room at Michigan State University? Super cool, but not practical for most of us. And when students arrive at these institutions, who has the coding and design skills to not just like play super hot and kill zombies in virtual reality, but to actually become users and innovators of these technologies? Has VR dramatically increased retention, completion times, or other metrics for the millions of students at community colleges? Probably not. So my major force in writing today is to try to be a useful skeptic. In some ways, again, the COVID era might change instruction. Speaking from my position as an educational technology specialist, I can say that there were faculty members who had previously been intimidated by the LMS and didn't want to engage Moodle, who either felt compelled or interested in doing so. And while that was a really useful lifeline for some basic like educational instruction tasks online, I don't consider setting up an online discussion board or finding a new way to share PDFs to be particularly transformative pedagogy, even if they're new to some users. During this conference, there's talks about Flipgrid and Google Docs and other tools that will persist and grow at our institutions, even when we're able to hold in-person meetings. And I don't doubt those tools' value, their ability to contribute to learning, or simply just make some of our online classes less boring and repetitive. But, I think the other issue is that there's an opportunity for institutions to welcome in tools that might not seem benign and vetted as Padlet and Flipgrid and things like that. Speaking for my institution, Kalamazoo College, and I hope some of you can relate to this, one of our greatest challenges in moving online was the issue of assessment. Many classes, like our natural science classes, still depend on in-class quizzing, testing, bubble sheets, high-stakes in-person assessment tools. And this seems like was a pretty common problem among our colleagues. So the question was, how did we perform these assessments online, knowing that the temptation to violate academic honesty for students was like so great that you felt guilty about even opening that door because it was really too easy? The task of reimagining possibilities outside of high-stakes testing has long been the work of progressive pedagogy. But this complex and unfamiliar task was probably unlikely to be comforting in the situation of contingency online teaching. So what did some institutions do? They, to bring this back around, turned towards various proctoring tools, browser add-ons, plagiarism detectors, tools that were by no means new and innovative, but may have found audiences with desperate instructors and administrators. Which is worse, tools like Proctorio, for some of the same reasons that Timothy mentioned in terms of technical resources, can aggravate inequalities that are already in place with the sudden transition to online learning. In a powerful Twitter thread, Eric Johnson, who's a computer engineering student at Miami University, critiques the various deceptive and hostile practices in Proctorio's term of service and platform. One tweet displayed here spoke directly to inequality. Not only are the privacy concerns very real, but Proctorio by nature discriminates against, forgive the term, low-class families, forcing a student to have a private, quiet room with a quality webcam, microphone, stable internet connection, and computer can be nearly impossible for some. So if we were going to change our teaching practices, I ask, who are we going to change it for? And I realize that part of why I keyed in on Mike Silagadze's headline is that for all the ways that lessons of the COVID era might change higher education, I think teaching and instructing might be some of the most untouched. especially if we accept that having an online class with synchronous elements on Teams and Zoom and Big Blue Button is not meaningful, revolutionary. So I've attempted to kind of weave together two threads from the history of educational technology with an admittedly large debt to Audrey Watters on my thinking. And the first notion is the idea that something has occurred that will once again transform teaching forever. And the other is that this new territory must be navigated by the latest technological innovations appropriate for the moment. I have a particular concern about this 2021 COVID era as a period when we in higher education are particularly vulnerable to not investing in teachers and faculty, pedagogical development, and student support, but new learning management systems, proctoring tools, and other expensive programs deemed now essential survival features. So if you remember one idea from this talk, you can look at my image of the tree of technology here of phones and gaming and messaging and sharing and apps and all kinds of things that even I don't immediately recognize. So if you remember one thing, it's to be cautious about the claims that the COVID era has changed instruction dramatically and that we require lots of shiny, expensive new tech to make it work. And with that, you get my Ghostbusters symbol of no. Thank you very much.